Alright, today we're going to talk about solving equations and inequalities. And before we get to start solving our equation here, let's talk a little bit about the process. Now, hopefully by this time you're familiar with the order of operations. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication and division, addition and subtraction. Well, we've already got our answer. We've already got what this thing is equal to. So we're going to have to work backwards on the order of operations to undo the things that have been done. In some ways you can think about it like taking a trip. We're here in Lexington, Kentucky, and if I were taking a trip to where I was born, it would be Chicago, Illinois. And so the way we would take that trip is you start on I-75 north, and then you go east on I-64, and then you go north on I-65 all the way through Indiana until you get into the Chicago suburbs. So to get back home, we've already gotten there because we've already gotten our answer. Now we've got to figure out how to go home. So we've got to do everything exactly backwards in exact backwards order. So instead of going north on I-65, we would have to go south on I-65 for the exact same number of miles, and then we would have to go west on I-64, and then we would have to go south on I-75 again to get home. So how does that apply to this problem? Well, this says the order of operations says take x, multiply it by 3, then add 2, we end up at 11. So to undo that, I have to undo the addition first. The last thing that was done has to be the first thing to be undone. And so we're going to do that with the inverse operation, which is subtracting 2. And so 2 minus 2 is 0, so we get 3x plus the 0, we can leave that out, is equal to 11 minus 2, or 9. And then the inverse operation of multiplying by 3 would be dividing by 3, and so x is equal to 3. And it doesn't matter how complicated our problems get. If we had a different problem that were, say, s is equal to 360 pi r squared a, and we want to solve this for r. Well, again, remember that variables are just numbers. Pi is just a number. So if I'm trying to get the r by itself there, then 360, pi, and a are all being multiplied by the r squared. So I can start by dividing by 360, by pi, and by a. So 360 divided by 360 is 1, pi divided by pi is 1, a divided by a is 1. And so I get s divided by 360 pi a is equal to r squared. Well, I want to get r by itself. So again, I'm going to go back to my inverse operations. And the inverse operation of squaring something would be taking the square root. So I take the square root of both sides, and so r is equal to the square root of s divided by 360 times pi times a. Now eventually we'll get to a spot where we're going to start rationalizing the denominator, but for right now we're just going to leave it like that because the r is by itself. Now the only thing that's really different when we start talking about inequalities is if we have a negative coefficient. So say we had negative 3x is greater than 12. Well, when we do our inverse operation on this, it's going to divide by negative 3. And so we have x and we have negative 4. Well, the only thing that's really going to change is because we divided by a negative, anytime you multiply or divide by a negative, you'll have to change the sign in the middle from greater than to less than. And the reason is if we had 1 is greater than negative 1. We can all agree that that's true, right? Well, if I multiply or divide both sides by negative 1, well, then the left side becomes negative 1 times 1 is negative 1. The right side, negative 1 times negative 1, is positive 1. The only way I can keep it true is by switching the sign around. And so we're going to solve solve inequalities the exact same way that we solve equations, with the exception of multiplying or dividing by negatives.